What's up, y'all? So I was reading Psalm chapter 1 today, and it says this in verse 3. It says, "He is like a tree planted beside flowing streams." This is talking about the one who is righteous, one who's taking refuge in the word of the Lord. It says, he's like a tree planted beside flowing streams that bears fruit in its season and whose leaves do not wither. Whatever he does prosper. Now, this idea is actually kind of interesting because we read in places like Galatians 9 and different places that the fruit of the Spirit, and we read this idea that the fruit is constantly producing spirit, the Spirit's constantly producing fruit. There's constantly something that's being produced in our lives as a Christian. And while that's true, I think this passage is actually talking about something a little different. And here's why. Because there's a distinction within the verse. One half of the verse is talking about fruit, and the other half is talking about leaves. See, here's the thing. I think what this verse is saying is that, yes, we're always going to have evidence of life. That's going to be the leaves. You never look at a tree that doesn't have leaves and you're like, well, that thing looks living and well. No, whenever you see a tree with leaves, that's when you think that it's actually doing well. But see, the fruit is completely different. You won't always see a vine or a tree producing fruit. Why? Because it might not just be the season. It might not be the time of year for that tree or that vine or that fig to produce fruit. And so here's what I think this means. I think the fruit is representative of the mountains and the valleys in your life. See, what's going to happen is when we have fruit in our lives, it's going to be like this mountaintop experience or like a good time in life. You know, times where you are thanking the Lord constantly and you're happy and you're joyful and all these different things. But then there's going to be seasons where you're not producing fruit. And those seasons are going to be a little bit more indicative of the valleys. And that doesn't necessarily mean that there's not life because you still have the leaves. You are still a being that is being renewed and restored and transformed by the Spirit. But it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows. See, sometimes life is not producing fruit. Sometimes you sit there in life and you're like, wow, this is really difficult. But see, here's the thing. Regardless, the Lord is still working and he's still producing and he's still doing things. And so let me encourage you with this verse, Psalm 1, chapter 1, verse 3. Be planted by the flowing stream. Be bearing of leaves. Have evidence that the Spirit is working within you. And sometimes when life isn't producing fruit, when you're not on the mountaintop, it's okay. Trust the Lord in that. Trust that the Lord is going to actually cultivate and prepare the next season of fruit through the valley that you're presently in. Last thing that I want you to see is that for all of this, whoever is planted by the stream, whatever he does will prosper. And this doesn't necessarily look like, oh, I'm going to, win the lottery or be rich or famous or any of those things. But what it does mean is the spiritual prosperity. When we're planted next to the Lord, when we are rooted in the Lord, that is when we can truly expect to see life, growth, and development. And so let me encourage you, be planted next to the Lord. Produce life. Let the life that the Spirit produces in you be evident. And don't be discouraged when there's a season that's not producing fruit because the Lord ultimately has control over that.